The sixth generation of consoles was a breeding ground perfect for developers both new and old to expand upon and evolve innovative ideas. Among them was, of course, Argonaut Software, now renamed Argonaut Games. They were responsible for the Croc series as well as N64 cult classic Buck Bumble, but they'd also been behind a string of successful licensed titles, carving out a respectable niche for themselves within the 3D platformer space. It was actually during this time they'd employ none other than Jamie Walker and Sefton Hill, two names that may not be recognizable right off the bat, but become all the more important when you realize they founded Rocksteady Studios. That's right, without these guys, there'd be no Batman Arkham series, and though it's a dubious claim to make, we have games like The Emperor's New Groove and Red Dog's Superior Firepower to thank for that. But Argonaut were a big studio with even bigger aspirations, and though they were yet to deliver upon the highly anticipated Malice, 2003 would be a busy year for them, seeing back-to-back-to-back releases of 3 very different games. But when both Bionicle and SWAT Global Strike Team failed to perform financially, a heavy burden would fall upon the shoulders of iNinja, a 3D platformer that taught us no one's taller than the last man standing.
This has long been a favorite of mine. I was obsessed with all things ninja as a kid. Ninja Turtles, Three Ninjas, Power Rangers, didn't matter. So when I found out there was a game where you could play as one and slice dudes in half, I knew it was right up my alley. But did it manage to pull Argonaut out of their financial slump? And more importantly, was it any good? Let's find out.
After an absolute banger of a title screen, it's straight into the story, as a pre-rendered cutscene introduces us to the ninja. After rescuing his sensei from a group of ranks, he touches a rage stone and flies into a fit of blind fury, accidentally killing him. Now guided by his ghostly master, he learns that it's his job to find and collect the remaining rage stones so that he can defeat the ranks and their leader, Emperor Odor. I've always enjoyed how over the top this intro is, but one thing I've never noticed until now is that the ranks are T-posing at the start. What's more is that this, along with every other cutscene, was directed by Don Bluth, the very same Don Bluth that gave us Dragon's Lair and Space Ace. Traditionally a two-dimensional artist, this was a completely different ballpark from his usual style, and I think that lends a very unique feel to them. Ninja himself is voiced by the one and only Billy West, best known for playing Philip J. Fry and Rayman that one time. There are actually quite a few voice acting greats in here, like D. Bradley Baker and Aaron Fitzgerald. It all makes for a real Saturday morning cartoon vibe, only with way more people getting cut down the middle. As I said before, the overall goal is collecting the other rage stones, but in order to do that, Ninja's gotta hone his abilities by means of level grades. Think of these like the stars from Mario 64. The more you collect, the more places you get to access. What's neat is that they more or less follow the martial arts belt system, meaning with every belt earned, there's a cosmetic change made to the ninja. Levels are hectic as all get out, complete with wall running, chain swinging, and hacking slashing goodness. Making use of fast and spin attacks, you can easily take apart ranks by the dozen whilst building up the combo meter. Not only that, but you can also knock dudes into the air for some light juggling and cap it all off with a downward chop. Yep, that never gets old. Movement-wise, there are the standard single and double jumps, which aside from being a bit floaty always prove reliable, but making use of his sword, Ninja's also capable of hovering in the air for a bit. While not nearly as impressive as Rayman's helicopter hair, this makes closing gaps as easy as pie, and is hands down one of the craziest uses for a sword I've ever seen. Thanks to his training, he's also well adept at getting around, being able to both run up and across walls, as well as grind along rails and even swing from chain points. All in all, it's a pretty solid moveset. There's a type of synergy between every mechanic, leading to a really nice flow that makes it simple to transition from wall running to rail grinding, and finally swinging across gaps. It would have been all too easy to make a run-of-the-mill platformer with a hero who happens to be a ninja, so for Argonaut to fully commit to the idea and incorporate these flashier things is pretty cool. My favorite has to be whenever you fight a Ranks or Kappa Captain, how the two opponents stare each other down before jumping into the air for a free-falling battle that sees only one walking away. Badass. The level design's also not too bad, short and sweet for the most part, with a healthy balance between fighting and platforming. Most combat areas see a barrier preventing the ninja from going any further, so you're encouraged to slice and dice whenever possible. Killing enough enemies to fill up the ranks bank sees our hero ditching his current blade for a more powerful one. A lot like the belts, these see a nice visual change take place, and each additional katana is stronger than the last, which makes fighting tougher bad guys a breeze. Not only that, but you can also make use of darts and shuriken to shake things up a bit, so there's no shortage of options when it comes to getting things done. For the most part, levels are based solely around getting from the start to the finish. There are never any additional objectives other than nabbing the grade at the end, so if you're looking for a platformer that's as linear as it is stylish, this one's for you. In fact, it doesn't even have any secondary MacGuffins. The closest to that are the regular coins, and even then, their use is pretty limited. However, it's after reaching the appropriate belt color that you can return an additional 2 times for more grades. These return trips are more so based around gimmicks than the initial visits, for instance, working against a timer or collecting all of the red coins. Yeah, even after all this time, Argonaut were still trying to make that Yoshi game. You've gotta respect their dedication. I'd be lying if I didn't say these felt more like cheap padding than anything else. Like, it isn't unheard of for a game to repurpose levels to get a bit of added mileage, but when all that entails is a single factor being changed, it gets boring. Not only that, but it can also be detrimental to the intended design. For instance, there are a few levels with dedicated stealth sections. Nothing too complicated, mind you, just avoiding enemies' cones of vision. On their own, these are completely doable if a little bit slow. Introduce a time limit into the mix and they suddenly become tedious. The absolute worst is the turret level in Area 2, as if the first time around, what with having to stop dudes from reaching the beach wasn't already bad enough, the second grade requires you to also get a score of 50,000, which can only be done by waiting out enemies and cheesing the multiplier system. But hey, for what it's worth, there are a lot of cool concepts here, and as crazy as this may sound, I see a lot of Croc 2 in this game. Rolling around on balls, chasing fuses, the only things missing are go-karts and hang gliding. But having to play almost every level 3 times is just too much, especially when you're dealing with the more open-ended ones later in the game. Destroying the Queen Sapsucker is more than enough the first time, so having to go back once to kill every enemy and again to find all the red coinage is just a chore. Luckily, this is iNinja we're talking about, a game whose style and music are in a league of their own. I mean, really, who'd have thought combining a cutesy chibi look with this amount of violence would make such a great combo? Dudes getting split down the middle with green blood flying everywhere, it's like that one Kung Lao fatality. Add to that a catchy electronic soundtrack along with the ninja's maniacal laughter, and you've got quite the recipe for crazy. The game's got a pretty good sense of humor about itself. The characters are all wacky and over the top, with even the wise old sensei spitting out half-assed proverbs.
Go get him! And as my master told me, a friend in need is good for the gander.
The one thing I've yet to mention are of course the Rage Stones themselves, which other than acting as a narrative device, grant ninja special power-ups. You start off with only one, being Ninja Berserker, which appropriately sees damage receiving a buff, but as you defeat the game's bosses, start to unlock more. There's Ninja Revive, which is handy for recovering lost health, Ninja Shuriken, which lets you ride around on a big-ass throwing star, and finally iNinja, which not only powers up attacks, but automatically hurts anything on screen. Knowing which to use and when comes in very handy. You can breeze through otherwise tough areas by just holding onto a shuriken or iNinja, so being mindful is very important when it comes to getting the most out of these. On that note, we have the bosses. Almost every one of them is fought within some sort of vehicle. Kai's a robot boxing match, Ventus is underwater, and Sayamon sees you controlling a turret robot. Credit where it's due, they're all unique from one another and serve up a nice change of pace, but only 2 of the 5 are actually fought as the ninja, and those 2 are arguably the best battles in the game. In fact, I'd even go so far as saying that Malachi is a better final boss than Odor. It's just a much more engaging battle that encourages you to use projectiles as well as get up close and personal, whereas the latter is really just the Panda King from Sly 1. Also, if you haven't quite caught on by this point, the entire punchline surrounding this game is that the enemies smell. The ranks, the stenchus, Odor, all just a joke to make people like me laugh while Stick in the Muds get angry. It's after defeating an area's boss that the respective guardian is freed. Now, these guys don't do much, but they do allow you access to the game's bonus levels, which can be purchased by regular coinage. These truly are master challenges, focused around completing some sort of ball rolling, chain running course that really tests your skills. The regular levels can be tough at times, but these right here are the true menace of iNinja. The eggshell one can be a serious pain, as it sees you facing Kaiza with no health whatsoever, meaning one hit and you're done. Then there's the final ball challenge that sees you not only having to collect coins against a timer, but concludes with an area that can only be navigated by slowing to a crawl and being as precise as possible. Ready for a dead joke to be exhumed? Well, if the Insane Trilogy is the Dark Souls of platformers, iNinja is easily the Sekiro of platformers. Guess it's only a matter of time before we find the Bloodborne and Elden Ring of platformers, huh? Actually, wait, wouldn't Medieval be the Bloodborne of platformers? I think we're getting somewhere. It all culminates with the battle against Odor, and if I somehow wasn't clear enough earlier, I think this is a pretty weak final boss. Dude's got the look for sure, but he's a serious pushover regardless of whatever phase he's in. While by no means on par with any of the bosses from Croc 1, he leaves quite a bit to be desired, especially since he talks so much smack but goes down easily. Provided you've collected all 64 grades, his defeat sees Ninja becoming imbued with all new powers, surpassing even Sensei himself. This is then followed by an FMV cutscene wherein our hero turns down a shot at immortality to resurrect his master. Oh, and it's also revealed that Odor survived. Big surprise there. With all that done, it's now that you can return to Robot Beach and access an all-new area. Welcome to the Battle Arena, a gauntlet of sorts that allows you to go up against every enemy type wave by wave. As the game's final challenge, this calls for you to make use of every combat ability you've gained so you can then receive the Master grade. And then it just ends. No extra cutscene, no added dialogue, just an unceremonious count of your achievements thus far. 100% endings were really something Argonaut struggled with, huh?
And do you want to know the worst part? Despite being loved by critics and just about everyone who played it, iNinja bombed, selling less than 1 million units worldwide. This, along with the failure of their last 2 games, all but sealed Argonaut's fate, which is made worse when you realize that, for the most part, it was all a product of poor timing in a year where the holiday release market was dominated by heavy hitters. Bionicle had reviewed poorly and was written off for good reason, but SWAT Global Strike Team, which Argonaut had placed perhaps the most stake in, was overshadowed the day of its release by none other than Rainbow Six 3, and was driven even further into the ground thanks to SOCOM 2. It was all just a perfect storm of misfortune and poor timing that led to the demise of one of the industry's greats.
But believe it or not, iNinja 2 was at one point in the works. Though never officially announced, confirmation was made when one of the game's artists posted their work on the internet. For the longest time, these drawings were all anybody had, until it was eventually discovered that an intro for the game also existed. Though devoid of both Billy West and D. Bradley Baker, it looks to be largely complete, and thanks to the inclusion of red blood, we can assume Argonaut weren't fooling around. However, as we all know, the game would never see the light of day, and Argonaut themselves would go belly up October 1st of 2004. That said, their death was very long and drawn out, as in the time between, they'd continue developing and releasing games, though with titles like Catwoman, it isn't too hard to figure out whether or not they fared well.
iNinja was also going to receive a sort of pseudo 3D port on the Game Boy Advance, but that never released. Still, there remains one more game to talk about in this Argonaut Palooza, so I hope you'll all join me next time as I take a look at their most polarizing game yet, Malice, on both the Xbox and PlayStation 2. I'll see you then.